You are listening to Hit Play, Not Pause, a feisty menopause podcast for active, performance-minded women. I am your host, Celine Yeager. Each week, I bring you advice from athletes, scientists, researchers, and other experts to help you feel and perform your best, no matter what your hormones are doing. This show is a production of Live Feisty Media. Hello, strong, feisty women. Welcome to Hit Play Not Pause, the podcast where we believe there are many ways up the mountain, and it is okay if yours is a different one. So, as many of you know, I have been in this business talking about health and exercise and nutrition and fitness since 1992, a long-ass time. And I have written countless features and now have been podcasting for going on 5 years. And I've also helped some amazing pioneering researchers bring their ideas into the world. Most notably, of course, Dr. Stacy Sims. And later this year, you'll see a book from Dr. Vonda Wright, who I'm also helping out in the publishing space. And when you write books, and when you write articles and blogs, and even do podcasts, honestly, by necessity, you have to paint with a pretty broad brush because you're talking to literally hundreds of thousands of people. So you're offering the best guidelines you can for the most people you can based on what you know and science shows and what you believe. But in the end, I think what's important to remember is that these are all just that. They are guidelines. And each of us has to experiment and find what works best for us in our lives. And that's where this week's guest, Hailey Babcock, enters the chat. Hailey, who operates Hailey Happens Fitness, partners with some of the biggest names in the business, including aforementioned Dr. Stacy Sims and Dr. Vonda Wright, and she helps turn their big training and nutrition ideas into practical advice on an individual level. So this week we talk all about it and how we should all think about our own selves as experiments of one. If you haven't checked her out yet, you can find Hailey at haileyhappensfitness.com and on Instagram and, of course, on her website. She is down to earth, level-headed, and we just had a really great conversation. I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. All right, before we get to it, give us a follow at Feisty Menopause on Instagram and Facebook. Come join our ever-growing private Hit Play Not Pause Facebook group where you can have conversations about all of this 24/7. Head to the show notes and click on and subscribe to my Feisty 40 Plus newsletter for all the news active women can use. Thanks, as always, for the continued great ratings, 5-star reviews, all of it. If you like the show, I would love if you could share it with a friend. I'm trying to grow this thing even bigger into 2025 here, and still, to this day, word of mouth is the way to make that happen. All right, very quick. Thanks to NutriSense for their ongoing support of the show. When you're trying to dial in your unique nutrition needs, NutriSense has the tools and the experts that can help you nail it. So thank you, NutriSense, for your ongoing support. All right, that is enough of me. Let's have a few words about our awesome sponsors and get on with the show. Okay, Hailey, welcome to our show. I'm very excited to have you here. You have existed as a box on my Instagram. It increasingly pops up with all the women that I work with. So it's really great to make this connection.
Oh, I was thrilled meeting. I feel like I said this last week when we actually had our official introduction. I feel like I know you. And then when I started chatting with you, I was like, oh, we've for sure met somewhere. I mean, no, we haven't, but I just feel like
in another life or somewhere, if you believe
yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So I'm thrilled to be here.
We tread along the same paths, and I'm really excited to have you here. So I would love to start a bit with your history. It's your gymnastics, your running, triathlon. Like, tell us a little bit about how you got into where you are now, your history with exercise.
Yeah. Okay. So I was active. I've been active my whole life. So mainly gymnastics was my sport. I was a super late bloomer. I'm 5'10", but I didn't even start menstruating until I was 16. And so
Wow.
I wasn't super tall until kind of later. So
Good for gymnastics.
Yes. And so it started going against me, once I got into high school. And, but I was a cheerleader and I was super active, but I ended up having back surgery my senior year. So I was.
From what? You just froze. Am I frozen for you?
17, I was the series. And so I think I just was
I'm gonna
maybe
pause a
predisposed and I
second.
picked terrible sports.
You
Oh,
you had paused on my you froze on my end. Um, so I'm going to and I'm wondering if that was me. Hold on a
start
sec.
fresh.
Yeah. Let me I just quit a few things to make sure. We had some little glitch in the universe. So let's you had froze, so let's just start with
My background.
yeah, you had you got it. You said I had back surgery, and then I went, and then you froze. So I don't know where you. So let's start with
Yes.
that. So you.
Okay.
So
So I
what
had
was the
back
back
surgery.
surgery? Go ahead.
I had a discectomy. Discectomy. I there wasn't like an acute fall or anything, but I think I picked really terrible sports maybe for my genetic makeup. I think my grandma had back surgery multiple times. And then I picked gymnastics and cheerleading. And I was taller in high school as I started getting my height. And so, of course, I was like the base, and we didn't know what we were doing. We were like catching people and dropping people. And so it just was, there wasn't a specific incident, but I started having issues since I was 15. I just had like pain down my leg. It was terrible. So anyways, that kind of ended my gymnastics career. I wanted to obviously I would have preferred to do that in college, but that wasn't an option after I had surgery. So then I kind of just went to college and started running, which was probably a terrible idea post back surgery. But it's the easiest thing and cheap and free. So I did that and then kind of started having my children in my mid 20s. And I needed a hobby. Honestly, I started staying home and I had nothing to do. And my husband was like, Hailey, you need to get a hobby. And boy, did I. He ended up eating those words because I started to kind of just like get into the triathlon world. I didn't know how to swim, but I knew how to run and bike. And so when I go in all in. So I hired a coach. I just started, and then we moved to Boulder, which is just, I started doing triathlon and just kind of kept with it. And I went from, the 10K to half Ironman distance was kind of spot. And I did that for about a decade. So loved that. But then I just started to kind of get into the strength training side towards the tail end of that. Started taking classes with Erin Carson online, did her online app, and just started seeing like, oh, I have some big imbalances here. And I need to start addressing those. And so by the time I had done my last 70.3, I was, I think 40 or
Oh well.
four. Yeah, I was 40 and I didn't know it was my last one at the time, but I kind of just like finished. It was the Chattanooga 70.3, my best time, loved it, great. And, as you do after an endurance event, usually there's niggles that pop up. So I started having like hamstring pain and, turned into like inner knee pain. And then it just kind of fused into this. We don't know, I don't know what's happening. I don't know what's wrong. Saw multiple specialists.
Were you
I was
lifting at all?
not really.
Okay.
I mean, I did Aaron's like program occasionally,
Okay.
but not, but
Okay. I
nothing
think maybe
regular.
you were doing mobility with her. Were you doing just like a accessory plan with her?
It was like an accessory plan. Yeah, it was just like I remember there were a lot of lunges,
Okay.
but like easy dumbbells. I mean, nothing heavy or regular at all. And so, anyways, fast forward about 6 months, and I end up having major knee surgery. And I had a full meniscus root tear at the back, which is different than just like a tear. A lot of people have tears,
Did you have
but
an accident?
no, I literally like I had just been feeling this pain and having these issues. I couldn't even like jog across the street and I didn't know why. And I had MRIs and they were like, we think you have a bone bruise because the meniscus root tear is really hard to see on an MRI. And so they just kept giving me like, you know, ibuprofen and just kind of being like, well, it takes a long time. They're really painful. And I was just like, how did I get a bone bruise? Well, my femur was hitting on the tibia without a meniscus sitting there. And so I
Oof.
started getting, um, you know, just having all of this pain. And really essentially what started happening is I started having bone death on the femoral condyle because it
Oh.
was just hitting bone on bone. And so luckily, I was living back east and I had access to hospital for special surgery, which was like the
Mhm.
best in New York City. And the doctor there was like, okay, I'm going to take you on, Hailey, because you're an athlete. But, over 40, I rarely do the surgery because
To say you're
the,
young.
yeah, well, he was just like, the success rate isn't great. So we'll try it. And I was like, I can rehab myself, I promise. Like, I know how to rehab myself. I can't keep doing what I'm doing now because I can't do anything. So, I mean, I was cycling, but even on like massive Advil every time I went out.
Was he saying that you were too old for the surgery?
He was saying I was too old, not too young. That over 40, he was like, the success rate is like 50%.
What would he have you do if it
A knee
you
replacement is the
Oh,
alternate.
and you're young for that. That's a weird
Yeah.
place to be in. Okay.
Yeah.
So he did the surgery.
So he did the surgery and it was the best thing of my life, like totally fixed. But this is the transition, I would say, into strength training is I
Mhm.
had 6 weeks completely non-weight bearing. Tell an endurance athlete that their last event was a 70.3, that you're going to be in bed for 6 weeks on crutches. You can't even touch your toe down, like for 6 weeks. And tell me how that doesn't do your head in. I
Yeah.
mean, it was terrible. But I looked at it and I was like, you know what? By damned, I'm gonna like train my brain. And so I just like went head first and I got my, personal training
Oh,
certification.
nice.
I went down a rabbit hole of just information overload, of just learning everything I could about strength training. And I was like, I've been doing this all wrong. Like I should have been prioritizing this because what I then realized was that what is super common for endurance athletes, my hamstrings were way too weak compared to my quad strength, which I see in females all the time. I mean, it's
Yep.
rare that I have someone come in that I'm like, your hamstrings are killing it compared to your quads. Like it just doesn't
Doesn't
happen.
happen.
So that really led me to this place where I was like, I'm going all in for strength training. I knew my endurance world was pretty much done. At least like I still cycle lots and that's easy. It doesn't bother my knees at all. And I mean, running doesn't really bother my knees at all either, but I rarely do it because I just prefer to be on my bike. So that's kind of where I'm at there. But what led me to being a strength coach?
Wow. That's really interesting. And at the time that you became a strength coach, was heavy lifting a thing? Was that something that you were starting to do and starting to prescribe?
No, I mean, I not really. Like I wasn't aware of it.
Yeah.
I just kind of knew that we needed to lift, and I had taught Pilates for about 15 years
Mm.
and loved it. Still have all the equipment in my house, but I started seeing holes when I had one-on-one sessions or when I was teaching classes. I was just like, why? Like nobody can do a proper push-up here. And yet they're coming every day and their cores are wicked strong. But, what are we missing here in the strength realm that needs to be added? Not that we need to take Pilates away, but what do we need to add to really get the body bulletproof? And so I started fusing on my own, just like strength kind of in my Pilates classes. I would just add it in with what I could, and found that that was super successful. Well, then kind of we hit 2020 and I'm living back east. We moved back to Boulder and everything's closed down. So I started doing like TRX workouts
Mm.
online, which I had done with a lot of clients. I mean, I think TRX is such an incredible tool for those women working out at home. For me, it's a must because there's just no way to pull and do any like rowing or pull downs or anything like that at home with just dumbbells. So I started doing that, and honestly, like I had no desire, no, not even a thought of like I'm going to own my own business. I'm going to start my app. Like I was just posting TRX stuff, and it just like I just started getting a following really, really quick, and probably because nobody had anything to do. And so TRX was something that was available while gyms were closed and dumbbells were out of stock, but TRX, like you could get a TRX.
Yeah.
And and so that's kind of what I just I don't know. Something's just like you a path is carved out that you didn't even intend. And all of a sudden you look back and you're like, this was not my intention at all. At
Tell me about
all.
it.
But here I am. And while I was in 2020 when everything was shut down, again, I'm not super big on just TV or movies. I mean, I like them, but I was just like, I'm going all in. I'm going to find every class I can find on fat loss, and strength training and advanced programming. And I'm just like doing this. Like, this is what I love. This is my TV. So I took a bunch of courses and learned a ton. And by the time I was finished with that, I was like, I'm going to do a fat loss course and I'm going to do one that specializes in women. And I know the age demographic I want to work with is really the 40 plus. Because I'm over 40 and the 20-year-olds don't want the old lady teaching them anything. Which is fine, which is fine. And I just started seeing all of this misinformation and just confusion. So, when I launched my app in 2021, I launched with 2 TRX programs. That's it. And then, but I was already prepping for a fat loss course with my business partner who really taught me everything that I know in the fat loss and advanced programming and everything that I know about strength training. So we were already working on a fat loss course because I took his and it was amazing. And I was like, how do we just kind of break this down and simplify it for Gen Pop and for everyday women that just need like, this is the same information that they have. The way women can get access to it is if they're working one-on-one with us, which just wasn't an option for a lot of women or anywhere in the world if you connect with someone. So I ended up starting my Fat Loss Happens course. It was the most stressful time of my life because I was like, no one's going to buy this. Nobody knows me. And we filled it up. Like I wanted to get 50 people. We got 50 people and we ended up, most of them were previous clients of mine in the Pilates world or friends or, people that I knew. It was all, I mean, that's how you start. And so I
Yeah.
did that. And it kind of has just morphed from there where I've added, I think now I have 22 programs, different workout plans, and 3 different courses. And so I didn't plan on being here, but man, I'm sure glad that my path took me here.
What are the fundamentals that you learned that you put in that fat loss course?
Well, number one, like this is a heavy subject that people think, it's a polarizing topic because everyone feels like they have the right formula. And I would say there's not a right formula. So the keto lovers, that's their formula. What works for them. There's intermittent fasting. That's what works for them. And it's really, Celine, you cannot talk someone out of something that like they're already convinced on and that they're like, oh, this works for me. So it's got to work for everyone. So my job of putting the fundamentals in was all of the education of a workout plan, number one. And what does the workout plan consist of? It has to consist of strength training and cardio. And so that's the easiest portion for most people is the workout. Most women are already exercising fairly regularly that are following me. Not everyone, but most women are doing something some days of the week. And so the workout plan was one. Number two is the education. And I know not everyone's big on calorie counting, but I use it as a tool for a certain period of time to get women familiar with what is in their food. Because the biggest thing that I see, and I'm not working with, I'm working with Gen Pop, so not necessarily endurance athletes that are over exercising and under eating, which is a huge thing. I'm positive I was one of those people unknowingly, because you're just on the bike for freaking 5 hours and you got to make up the calories. So the population I was looking at, like that came to me, was really like, they didn't really know they were eating clean, they were eating well, but they had no clue. And once they started putting in their food, they were like, Hailey, holy shit, there was 600 calories in my smoothie, and I would have thought it was 350. So we use it as a tool. So for me, that can be polarizing for some women, and it's not mandatory. There's other options if you have disordered eating with counting calories, and it's not a good place to be. But for the most part, we use it as an educational tool for a short period of time to get familiar with the food, instead of just saying, here's a meal plan, which, as you know, like we're not prescribed. Technically, it's not in our field of, it's out of our lane.
Right.
So if you teach the women how to eat, then they have the tools and the education to be able to take that and feed themselves for the rest of their life without being reliant on a one-on-one coach. Or when they go on vacation, they're like, well, I don't know what to do. I was always just told what to eat. I don't know what a portion size actually looks like on a plate, which is hard in America because, especially in America, the portion sizes are not small.
Yeah.
So that's the main part. And then I just started adding in education from everything else. The more information that you have, the better off you are, and the more you believe in the process of it working. So I think those are the fundamentals. Is you have to know what's in your food. You have to, know what 40 grams of protein should look like on your plate. Because if you don't, you're never going to hit that. You have to have at least a rough idea of what kind of calories you're eating, because most women are consuming more than they think. I mean, all of the research shows us that in general population, most women or men, I mean, really anyone, we overestimate our exercise calories and underestimate our
Do you
food
think that's
calories.
that's true for the endurance training population as well?
Probably not. I mean, I would say the endurance athletes are more into that over exercise, under eating.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so there's two camps. I mean,
Yeah.
if there's one thing that I've learned, is there's not an absolute for anything.
Yeah.
Not for anything, not for nutrition, not for, exercise, nothing.
And you must encounter, being that you work with 40 plus women, and I talked to Bill Campbell, who is going to be on the show very, very shortly too, that there are women who have it all together and then they hit the perimenopause and menopause transition, and all of a sudden it's not working anymore and they're resistant to fat loss and things are changing and they're like, how are you working with those women?
Okay, so when I break it down, and I do the same thing for my groups, for my one-on-one clients, in person or online. And we first start to look at, like, what does your week look like? What have you been doing that doesn't necessarily work anymore?
Hmm.
So your conversation might be a little bit different from mine because, again, I have more of the general pop, but it really is like, if something's not working, either in the endurance world or Gen Pop, that aren't, like, what do we need to, how do we break it down and see what we need to fix? And usually for me, the first thing is nutrition. How do we look at that and just look at a day in the life of this client and say, okay, what are some areas that we can work on? Because again, the majority of women that are coming to me aren't like, well, I'm eating Cheetos 24/7. Why the hell am I gaining weight?
Right.
They're eating pretty good, but they're in a short period of time just feel like they've lost themselves. So nutrition has to be a part of the conversation. And then we look at exercise. We all know now. I mean, everyone on this podcast knows that strength training is important and we have to do it. What does that look like for that client? What have they been doing? Because I get asked on the daily, either through my app or DMs, what program should I pick? I've been strength training for X amount of years. And then when we break it down and I ask more questions, it's like, oh, well, I've been doing, a group class that we have like maybe up to 10-pound dumbbells. That's great. I'm not dissing on
Yeah.
that at all,
Yeah.
but I'm like, okay, well, maybe we can look at a more progressive periodized program to where you're going to get results. So it's usually like, even if women think that they're lifting, what is the definition of lifting? And because strength training, when if somebody says, oh, I'm definitely intermediate, what does that mean? What does that look like? Because it's different for every program and for every person out there. Somebody might say that they're intermediate because they've been doing group classes for 3 years, but they haven't lifted over 15 pounds. To me, that is not my definition of an intermediate.
So break that down a little bit more for us. What lifting heavy shit, all the lifting heavy conversation has been happening now. I've been part of that conversation. And honestly, mostly because it was transformational for me once I actually learned how to lift heavy on my
Mhm.
bicycle, running, all of it. I credit learning how to lift heavy with me being able to train for an ultra right now. That would not be happening without that stimulus, without that injury resilience that it gives me, all of the things.
Mhm.
So what that said, we also have nuances in this conversation that I'd like to talk to you about where
Yes, we do.
it gets kind of lost, like what that actually looks like and how it's integrated and how you also work in accessory lifts and to your point, the periodization. So frame it the way that you see it as far as getting women to lift heavy because most people, unless they learn, they still do self-select too small, too low of
Yeah.
weights. And if they do jump right in, that's not really the answer either. So frame it up for us a little bit.
Okay, so if we look at periodization over a year, and I really try to get ladies to be like, let's plan this out instead of it just being random. Like, oh, I'm going to do this online program, and then I'm going to move here, and I like this influencer, so I might do this, and then I'm going to do a race here. Plan it out. And by all means, this is not going to stick, and most of the year goes not like we planned it to be. But a good majority can be planned out and we can just ebb and flow as we need to. So when I look at 3-month training blocks and I'll ask, what do you have in the next 3 months? If you have a race, probably not the time to be doing a fat loss phase. If you have a vacation, probably not the time to pick a gym only program of just like heavy lifting. So I try to say like look at your blocks in 3-month periods and plan out roughly a calendar year. And what should be included in that from my point of view is periodized training. What does that mean? That means working in every rep range for different reasons. When we look at all of the data out there, there's different reasons that we work in different rep ranges. So there's endurance, there's power, there's max strength, there's hypertrophy. So I make my women do all of it. I think that it's important to work on all of those rep ranges to get the benefits. And honestly, if one program cannot cover everything, and we shouldn't think that it will. So
What do you
what
mean by
is the
that?
main?
You mean like just following one part of that
One program cannot
periodization?
cover every single goal that we have. It can't cover endurance and hypertrophy and make max strength and power. It's just like we can't do all the accessories and the compound lifts like and hit every muscle group evenly in one program. So that's where periodization comes in so that we look at what do we want to do. For me, I think a foundational phase of training, and the endurance athletes are going to know this because they don't train the same year round. They are working in low zone, zone two for the off season, and they're building their work capacity. And, their training looks very different at month one than it does at taper or a month before taper. So if we train that way in the endurance world and the Olympic athletes train that way, why wouldn't we train that same way in the weights room? So my point of view is a foundation phase of training. And by that, I mean like a general preparation phase. That's where you come in and your goal is general training, building up weak links, neglected areas. So if you've been on the bike and your quads are like killing it, but you're like, oh, I'm having a little bit of knee pain here. I mean, there's always something chatty in women over 40. I don't know anyone that doesn't have something where they're like, well, this shoulder tends to get, kind of aggravated. It's most of the time, it's usually due to an imbalance, and we've just neglected certain areas. And those areas are usually not fun all the time. It's rotator cuff stuff. It's working on the foot stabilizers. It's prioritizing a little more low back work. But if we don't do that well and we skip that, then good luck training the rest of the year, heavy lifting all the time and not having something creep up that could be very like a huge setback with injury. So I feel super passionate about that. I could talk about that all day, the foundation phase of training.
And what kind of rep ranges are you doing in that foundational?
15 to 20. Nobody wants to do that. And honestly, like this is a short period of time. So if we zoom out from this is the thing that I should do, this is the only thing I should do. And if we zoom out, it's like if you're working the rotator cuff muscle, which you should at some point, you should be working those if you're lifting heavy. You're not going to get the benefits of these small muscles with 4 reps or 5 reps or even 8 reps. Those need higher volume. And then, for the core, for the biceps, for the triceps, those require higher volume. And it's a time, honestly, I don't know about you, Celine, but for me, I'm like, I long for a short period of time. I love lifting heavy all the time. And anyone that follows me, you can see that I'm like hammering it out most of the year. But there is a small period of time where I pull back and I don't do any heavy lifting and I work on these weak links and I improve my work capacity and I improve my, muscle symmetry, front to back, left to right, prime mover, which is the big muscles, to the stabilizer muscles, the smaller guys, so that I have a bulletproof body and I can take on the demands of my future training programs.
And you're cycling that how many times throughout the year, do you think?
So this is how it works. I do it once a year, and that means I could also break that up. Usually a foundation phase of training, depending on the client. Now, a brand new newbie might be in a foundation phase of training for 3 to 6 months. I usually do about 8 to 10 weeks, and I might do that all in one chunk, or I might kind of be like, well, I'm going to do 6 weeks, and then I'm going to, depending on what my year looks like and how I plan it out. But I put that in once, and then all of my other programs, I pepper them in. So I'll do grip strength for one program. I'll do foot stabilizers in another. I'll do rotator cuff in, so that we're always kind of having a little bit in there. But the big goal for most of the year should be, if the female's goal is lifting heavy and, getting all of the benefits and hypertrophy, and they want to grow muscle and they want strong bones, it should be on the compound lifting most of the year. But there should be a time that we pull back and work on balancing the body.
And of course, if they have other ambitions in there, whether it's being a gravel race or that kind of stuff, that all has to be taken into consideration.
100%.
Yeah.
Yes. And then your training would go around that and what your goals specifically are.
Are the women that you work with receptive to all this? Do they?
Most of them are. I
Yeah.
mean, not everyone is. My one-on-one clients don't have a choice. They do a foundation phase every year because if not, I have not met a single female that does not have something pop up,
Yeah.
especially post-menopause. It is a different game post-menopause than it is for someone that's 39 or 40.
Yeah.
So I would do more of a foundational work there. But honestly, if we go back to the rep ranges, unpopular opinion, but I would say I don't, I don't think every female might be able to lift really, really heavy in the low rep ranges all the time. Can we edit this?
We can certainly edit. What are you trying to say? I
Gotta be careful.
I understand. What do you really want to say? Because I have never I don't know what my one max is. I don't care. I
No,
do lift heavy, but my means to an end is not seeing what my one rep is. Do you know what I
no,
mean? My means to an end is being durable, resilient, strong, stimulating the muscle satellite cells, all of that. And I get close, but I am not, the risk reward is not there for me.
not at all. I don't, I've done a run one rep max once. I'm just like, what's the point? I
Yeah.
don't need to. And I have plenty of muscle and I have like I'm happy with my strength where it is. And it's always a work in progress, obviously, but I don't think that every female has to be down in that 1, 2, or even 3
I agree
rep range.
100%. I agree 100%.
And most women that I work with in person, it gives you a different lens when you're training women in person. My, over post-menopausal, let's say, over 50 crowd, a, a good majority of them aren't even lifting in the 4 rep range because they have different issues that it's just not worth the risk for me as their coach. Now they can still get benefits. Maybe they work in a 6x6, and that's great. They still mostly work in hypertrophy just because not everyone can handle the load, especially if you don't have eyes on you and a coach that you're working with that's really knowledgeable all the time. And so I love the conversation that we should be lifting heavy. We need to be lifting heavy. Can you hear my dog?
I just did, but that's okay. Like we can edit the dog out.
I'm gonna kill. Um, okay,
We
what was
need
I
to be
saying?
lifting heavy is what you were saying. And uh, I agree with everything you said, and that's why I said this conversation is nuanced. It's easy, and I do have a shirt that says "Lift Heavy Shit," and I'm down with it because I think women have been afraid to lift heavy for so long for so many
Me
bullshit
too.
reasons.
Hmm.
Um, and and I do believe that understanding the nuance and that does not mean that you need to take unnecessary risks, that you can still work within your body. I'm a big fan of 5x5s, five reps. I rarely go to 4. 5 to 6 is a real nice sweet spot for me, especially as an endurance athlete, because again, that risk benefit thing, that's just where I am. I'm
Yeah.
not competing in any lifting.
Powerlifting.
No, I'm not doing that. I'm not trying to go for a one rep max.
No, I agree too. And I think that it's the part of the conversation is there is a place for everyone because it breaks my heart when somebody reaches out and they're like, you know, I had back surgery. I'm terrified of going down into low
Yeah.
rep range. Then don't.
Yeah.
Get the benefits from yes and yes. We should be lifting heavy when it's appropriate and if your body is ready for it. But there is a huge buy-in process. And a beginner that's getting this message, to my mind, should not be going down into single digits or under, I would say, under 8 reps for 9 to 12 months. So put a lot of time in there with higher reps. And what higher reps, the benefit for a beginner female in the gym is they're getting just movement literacy over and over and over again, rep after rep after rep, teaching the nervous system. What does this look like? What does it feel like? What muscles am I engaging? And you have to have that knowledge before we start adding load. And then you can progress steadily but safely into those lower rep ranges if that's what you want. But there is a place for you if you don't feel comfortable or don't feel like this works for your body. You can still get amazing benefits for like if you want to stay in some higher rep ranges and that works for you. So it really is individual of, what do we need and what do we want versus what really works for us in a safe way, because injury is just, it's never worth having a setback for, 3 to 6 months ever.
I agree with that completely. You yourself, are you 47? Is that correct?
47.
I'm 56, sister, so don't I'm I'm far down the road from you. Um, where are you in the menopause transition?
Well, I'm for sure in Perry, no question, given the age. And, I'm functioning pretty well still. I will say I did just start HRT.
You did. What made you
Uh-huh.
start that?
Okay, I'm going to tell you why.
Okay.
Um, I have a
Because
little
you're
bit.
working with Vonda right. No, we'll get into
Yeah.
those discussions in a second.
Well, I have Dr. Heather Hirsch coming on
Oh,
that is
I,
coming on
I've had
to
her
my
on the
fat
show.
loss. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's hard for me when I get asked every day, especially in these courses where like, well, Hailey, what do you think? And I'm like, well, I can tell you what the science says, or I can refer you to these physicians, but like I haven't gone there myself, so I don't know. And so I just talked to Heather and I was like, I kind of want to do a case study on myself.
I understand that.
So I'm going to give it a shot. I mean, really, I was looking at just progesterone for sleep because my sleep has just been really like middle of the night awakenings, and it
Yep,
will
that's how
last
it
for like an,
starts.
oh my gosh, it's terrible.
That's
Like
how it
last night, I'm
begins,
just like,
Haley.
oh,
That was my first indication and I didn't know it. But yeah,
yeah.
hmm
Yeah. So I started progesterone about 6 weeks ago, right around like Christmas. I started and I just started with that. And then last week I just added in the lowest dose of estrogen. And I don't really know. I mean, I've been on it for like 5 days
Yeah.
and I missed a day, if I'm honest. So technically I'm brand new to it. And I'm just curious. I'm curious. I do have brain fog. I've had migraines that are getting worse as I age. And I've started to just have like where I had back surgery, like I just ache more. Like my back is always really achy and sore where it never used to be. Um, and it doesn't like correspond with a heavy lifting day like the day before. It's just like
Right.
out of nowhere. I'm like, but I didn't do anything. And, now my arm kind of just aches. So things are happening. And so I'm just like, well, it'd be a little case study for myself and see.
Yeah, that's super interesting because the things that you were describing are the things that when I started this 4.5 years ago or so, people weren't talking about. I had the anxiety. I had waking up in the middle of the night. I didn't have a lot of the quote unquote classic things that you would talk about with menopause. My cycles were like clockwork still while all that was
Yeah.
happening. And I didn't have the aches and pains, but the things that have often been ascribed to, oh, you're just getting older, we now know that can be hormonal, like the musculoskeletal syndrome of menopause, let's say. So
Yes.
yeah, it's good to hear because the more we know, the more we can be proactive. So I am curious to see if that resolves with your trial.
Yeah. We'll see. I'll keep you posted. We'll do a part two.
So speaking of you, you have some interesting partnerships. I've watched over the years. You've partnered with Dr. Stacy Sims. You're now, I see, working with Dr. Vonda Wright. How did those come to be?
So I'm really good at just asking questions, Celine, and I don't care if I get turned down. So I would say that's one. I had Stacy on a couple of Instagram lives and we just had like a great connection. Like the lives were always great and we just really jived together. And so in, let's see, the end of 2023, I got up the guts and I had this email seriously sitting in drafts for probably 2 months. And my husband was like, if I have to hear about this one more time, because I was just like, oh, she's for sure doing something. She's for sure doing something with someone else. Like I'm getting asked all the time, what one of your program is what Dr. Sims would recommend. And I was like, I'm just going to ask her. So finally I just sent it and I was like, hey, I get asked this all the time. So I'm sure you do too. Would you want to do a collaboration on a program? And it was like crickets for like a week or two. And I was like, well, I guess she's out. She's busy. That's fine. No, no skin off my nose. And then I got an email and she's like, yeah, let's do it. And I flew down to New Zealand in January a year
Wow.
ago. And Power Happens began, almost a year ago, last March. So that's kind of how that one did. And then honestly, I didn't even like Vonda started following me and then I started following her at the first of last year and she asked me about one of my programs and so I just gave her one of the programs to try and then we kind of just like, you know, had a couple of interactions here or there, but I hadn't met her until this past November, just barely at her women's health
Hmm.
conversations. So I had her on my podcast, and then after I was like, you want to do a program? She's like, sure. Okay. So, I mean, honestly, it's for me, I'm like, I have the platform, which is the hardest part. I already have pretty much every exercise filmed. My husband's in branding and advertising, so that helps too. So I can carry a lot of the load. And I just like when I came onto this space, I really was like, I'm going to find people that are way smarter than me that I can collaborate with. What can I benefit and what are my skill sets? And then how do I collaborate with other incredible women that have skill sets that I'll never have? And we can just come together and see what I can offer them and what they can offer me.
Yeah, it's cool. It's cool to see these collaborations because as you mentioned and what I think is going to be important for women to hear from this conversation is, and I run into it all the time. So to speak very plainly to everyone listening, when you write a book, when you do these kind of things, you have to paint with a very, very broad brush. So you bring the science and you talk about what the science shows and you give a very broad explanation of things and suggestions that are guide rails.
Mhm.
And every individual is going to be different. There are going to be outliers. So it's good to have somebody who, like yourself, boots on the ground, be able to bring these principles to a more individualized, into an more individualized way, if that makes sense.
Oh, yes, for sure. And I let women know because I get asked all the time. Well, but Stacy says this and Vonda says that. And I'm like,
Yep.
that's okay. What makes sense for you? I love both of them. And that doesn't mean that every collaborator that I have agrees on all of the same things, but we don't follow. Most of us aren't following, one, home improvement person. We're following multiple. There's room for, I try to say, like, use yourself and let yourself be your own science experiment. And where it can be confusing because there's so much like, do this, don't do this, you know, different prescriptions where it's like it really comes down to the individual because I haven't had anyone that really does that responds the exact same way. And so number one, we can't take out things that we love. That's probably another question that
Amen.
you get all the
I say that all
time.
the time.
All the time. I mean, and the women are almost like feeling really embarrassed for even asking, like, but Hailey, I really love my group fitness class. I know I need to do. I'm like, so don't give it up. Maybe negotiate with yourself and say, I love this class. It's giving me all of these things that I need. I need, some camaraderie and I love to be with my friends and I love the group fitness instructor. Okay, awesome. Do that, but maybe can you add in one or two strength days? And if that's enough. It has to be enough. It has to be if we can't stick with something or we hate it. I talked to a lady yesterday and she was like, "Sorry, but I hate lifting heavy." I'm like, "Cool, at least you know. Like you've done it." I said, "I don't know if you like maybe if you tried some different programming and some overload methods, like maybe you just haven't given it a good enough go, but you might also just not like it. And if you don't like it, what can you do that you like?" And so she had done one of my other programs, and I was like, "Did you hate that?" I mean, you can tell me. I don't care. It's not going to hurt my feelings. I'm trying to help you. And she's like, "Yeah, I actually like that one." Okay, so do that one and see if that works. But if we take out things that really like make us who we are and that we love, then we're doing something that ends up just down the line being like, "I don't even like this. Why am I doing it?" Or I'm not seeing the body composition changes, or, I'm not seeing this. Like that has to be taken into account. And negotiation is probably the best way. Give this, take this.
You mentioned that concurrent training, cardio and weights is really essential. What is your global, now that we've talked about everything needs to be individualized, what is your global thought on cardio recommendations?
Uh,
Not for
like
endurance
different.
athletes. They're going to go out and do their thing anybody. But like what intensities, what amounts, like generally speaking, how does that fit into your program?
All right. Well, of course, there's always like, except, I mean, there's always the exceptions, but overall, the majority of my programs and all of my courses that I run, they have women doing all zones. So
Okay.
we are doing zone two. We are doing, high intensity interval, which is like for hit sit, like it's under one umbrella for me. So interval training and steady state.
Okay.
So if a fat loss group, when I have my fat loss group, the zone two day, which a lot of women push back at first and they're like, "Well, but I want to do a hit." And I'm like, if you're doing hit at the intensity you should be doing it, and you're doing these workouts on limited calories, you're going to want a chill day where you can just like zone out and recover easy, where you're not, there's so many reasons why zone two is so beneficial for someone, say, in a fat loss phase, just for energy needs. But then on a more global scale, it's like, okay, if I have a beginner, I'm not just telling them to go do sprints. I'm saying we got to build your engine. We got to work on building your work capacity and getting fitter so that we can handle, the demands of the training sessions that are harder and that take longer to recover from. So, to my mind, I prescribe everything. And the amounts are totally individual to what does the person like, because there are women that hate zone two and there are women that hate high intensity. And so again, it's like, well, could you do, one high intensity and, maybe do the rest of your rides that you like to do with your local, women's club? Great. You just found one negotiation that works for you. So I really feel like it's individual, but I think when we pigeonhole into one specific thing, it's isolating if women aren't like, "But I don't fit into that. Where do
Hmm.
I fit in if I want to do these other things?" And like I said from the start, if I have one global message, it's there is a place for everyone. Everyone. As long as you're strength training and you're doing some cardio and you're eating pretty well with high protein, like you literally can't go wrong. Sure, if you want a really like a specific goal, if you want to win your age group at an Ironman, you're gonna have to be more dialed in.
Yeah.
But for most women, like cover the big rocks. And if you're doing more than you were doing before, you're already winning.
Do you have women asking you about cortisol?
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. I mean, I bet we, if we like showed each other our questions that we get all the time, like we're answering the same questions. So, not an issue. I mean,
What do you tell them?
again,
I women,
well,
I am shocked at how wound up that conversation has become.
well, it's because there's lots of different experts that are like, don't let your cortisol spike. Well, it's going to with exercise.
Yep.
So, to
You
me, I'm
need
just
to.
like, it needs to. So again, I'm always like, if you can't talk someone into something that they already believe. So that's number one. But I usually say, you know what? Why don't you try it this way and see how you feel and, do this for maybe 12 weeks. And if it's not working for you, you didn't sell the family farm to do it. So find, like, see if it works. And then maybe you have a different decision. And maybe, what you thought you believed in or that you weren't supposed to do, maybe it ends up coming where you're like, wow, I actually saw great results and I feel great and my blood works great and, XYZ reasons. Maybe this needs to be part of my conversation now.
And how do you talk to them about recovery?
Okay, so we know that women need more recovery. And this is where the programming really comes into play too. So some women like time is a huge issue. Again, I always say I don't know anyone that's just like cold kicking it that has like hours and hours of nothing to do. So, what do you have time for? And how does that work into your training schedule? So, try the 30 minutes and maybe you recover a lot better from that. Um, try, if you have more time, maybe like you have to kind of play with yourself and again see like what works for me. If I have a program from Hailey and it's 6 days a week, but I feel like crap, you know, you don't need my permission to cut out a day. Cut out a day.
They do need your permission, Haley. You
Well,
know
I
that.
know because
I know.
Hailey, is this okay? I'm like, for sure. You should
Yeah.
be. I mean, really, that's something that I have pulled back on. And this is I'm not a type A personality. Like I'm just not. But I have a lot and then there's a lot of endurance athletes that are and they do need permission. But for me, like it
I
is,
might be one.
yeah. I mean, and it's hard to be like, well, I can't take time off. I've been doing 12 hours a week for my, whatever race. Yeah, you can. And you probably should
Yeah.
because we know we can't run on empty. We know we can't run on, what we could do and the minimal sleep. And once all of those things start to affect women of this age, you can't. I mean, you just won't see the benefits. I mean, I've had clients that they don't always tell you the truth, even though that, you're like, well, I'm an open, you can say anything to me. What are you doing? But then when I see it, I'm like, well, you're not really making any gains. Let's pull back and see. Well, I'm not sleeping. And I actually just have limited my calories because I felt like I was getting a little pudgy. Okay, that's a huge part of the conversation for your coach because otherwise I'm like, something doesn't add up. We should be, following a trend of being able to build some muscle here. But if we're not recovering and we're not eating enough, not going to happen.
Yeah, and I do like reinforcing that there's a lot of binary thinking. I see this with hormone therapy too. I mean, they're all in or I'm all out. I'm like, well, you
Yeah.
can try for a while
Yeah.
and see, you're not going to break yourself. You're not going to break yourself. So, like, that is a just really good advice with the recovery, with try to take that full day off and see how you feel. You'll probably feel pretty great. And then your next workout will be that much better. Or try this approach. I appreciate that a lot. I think there's a lot to be gained from being open to a little bit of experimentation.
Oh, for sure. And to, gauge yourself every day and be like, okay, women
Mm.
love to be smashed. They love to be like, Hailey, I was so sore. I couldn't even sit down for 2 days. I'm like, well, you just missed 2 days in the gym. So that's a bummer. Like, no, it doesn't work that way, but that's kind of how we have been trained.
Yes.
So
That's
there's a
how it's
lot
done.
of unpacking with the conversation, Celine, of everything that we've talked about is like, yeah, women weren't lifting heavy because we weren't taught that it was important. Women weren't lifting, at all because we were taught that cardio is what is going to make us thin. We weren't taught to eat all of this protein. And so we were just running on super low calories. So all of this, we weren't taught to recover. We were taught to just like, oh, if you can't walk the next day, you just had the best workout of your life. And that takes a lot to unpack and then swing the pendulum to where we're like, wait, now I'm supposed to be eating more. And now I'm supposed to be taking days off. And now I'm supposed to be like not doing as much cardio. Of course, it's confusing. It's like, well, what am I? I mean, do you get asked all the time, what am I supposed to do?
Of course.
Just tell me what to do.
Just tell me what to do. Tell me what to eat and tell me what to do. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And if there was, I can give broad strokes for the general public, but yeah, to work with somebody on the individual levels was where you get into the weeds and the nuances and the whole person. And that's just every person is a unique picture.
Yeah. And honestly, again, I'm going to keep saying, be your own science, your own scientist with your body. And if you're like, well, I'm not, I don't want to do more rep ranges. Okay, great. But, you also can't complain that you want like defined shoulders or biceps or all the time people are like, well, I want Stacy's arms. Like, okay, well, you're going to have to do some more volume for that. It's not just going to happen overnight, or you're just going to have to be really patient. So, what do you ultimately want? What's the ultimate goal here? How can you make it fit for your lifestyle? Not what I say, not what you say, not what anybody says, but like, how can I negotiate and be like, all right, I'm going to take this piece. This works for me. I can do this and I like it, but I'm not going to give up this piece. As long as they're all healthy endeavors, which most of them are, then find something that works for you. I mean, there's literally, again, I don't feel like there's absolutes. You can only do this, you can never do this, or for anything, for nutrition, for nothing. Find something that works for you. And I know that that seems hard, but I like to remind the women like you can trust yourself. Trust yourself. What feels good in your gut? Does this feel good for you? Are you happy with this program? Is it working for you? Do you feel supported? Do you like getting up every day and doing it? Trust yourself because you can, it can look a lot of different ways.
That's a good mic drop. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you wanted to make sure that women heard? But I mean, like that was a good mic drop right there.
Done and dusted. No, I think we covered everything. I feel super um emotional, I would say, about the women that come to me and that I might may have a tiny sliver in their story, tiny bit, whether it's, you know, I gave them my recommendation or they did a program or they felt really good with this course or they learned this. Like, trust yourself, find find someone that you connect with, that you feel good with, and that it doesn't matter if there's differing opinions. Like there's always going to be differing opinions. And it's okay. And I think that's the important part is it's okay. Duck Gabrielle Lyon says something totally different than someone else. And Vonda may say something totally different than this person. And it's not meant to be like, take what works for you and really break it down and say, does this make sense for me? And just does this work for me? And then you're not committed to anything. Like none of us are, again, betting the family farm of like, well, I'm going to not do sit, but then I might be screwed and I, lost all my money. Like pivot and find something else that works.
And that has always been true. we can wrap this up with that because when you look at any of the I used to write for like the Women's Health and the Men's Health and all those magazines quite a bit, and there's all kinds of conflicting information from month to month to month, but I was always like, well, there's many ways up the mountain and you're looking to land something with everybody, and
Hmm.
that's kind of how that system works. That's why
Yeah,
it is that way.
I agree.
So, well, thank
Great
you, Haley.
conversation.
Yeah, for sharing your wisdom.
Thanks for having me on.
Well, that's our show. Come on back next week when I sit down with Dr. Kelly McNulty, who researches how hormones and hormonal life phases impact our training and our life. She's done some really great studies on the barriers we face during perimenopause and menopause, and we talk all about it next week. So come on back for that one. Until then, as always, stay feisty. You've been listening to Hit Play, Not Pause, a feisty menopause podcast for active, performance-minded women. I'm your host, Celine Yeager. The show is edited and produced by the strong, talented, and amazing women at Live Feisty Media. Follow us on social media at Feisty Menopause, and please help us spread the word. Screenshot and share this episode on your social media channels with the tag @FeistyMenopause. Share the show with your friends, and please subscribe, like, review, and rate this show wherever you get your podcasts. Word of mouth and good reviews make it easier for other listeners to find. Thanks for listening, and as always, stay feisty.